Alright, so in this video we're going to talk about factoring by grouping. So let's look at what we've done in the past. So regular factoring has looked like this, where we find the GCF and we pull it on the outside and then have our parentheses with what was left in the middle. But factoring by grouping is going to look like this from now on. So what's the difference? Notice there are 4 terms, and up here there's only 3, okay? So when you factor by grouping, there has to be 4 terms. Most likely, this exponent is going to be a 3, okay? So the exponent will go 3, 2, 1, and no exponent, okay? So that is when you can factor by grouping. So let's look on how we do that. So let's look at part 3 of this. So consider this polynomial, 6x cubed plus 9x squared plus 10x plus 15, okay? It's got 4 terms. So I can factor by grouping. So what you have to do is you look at the first 2, and you find the GCF of the first 2. Okay, so we split this up into 2 different little problems, the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. Okay, so now what's the GCF? So I know 6 is 3 times 2, and there were 3 x's. 9 is going to break down into 3 times 3 with 2 x's. So they have a 3 in common, and then they have 2 x's in common, and that would make that 3x squared, okay? So that is my GCF of the first 2 terms, okay? So now I'm going to rewrite these 2 terms so that the GCF is outside the parentheses like we've done in the past. So remember, you're kind of set up for this. Is your GCF goes out here with the first 2 terms in the middle. So my GCF was 3x squared. So now you just need to figure out what the terms are in the middle by dividing them. So 6 divided by 3 is a 2. And then I had 3 x's and I took 2 away. So there would be 1x with that term. Again, to get a 9x squared, 9 divided by 3 is a 3. And then I had x squared, and then I took them all away, so there is no exponents with that, okay? So that's what we did previously when we factored out a monomial, okay? So I'm all good with those first 2 terms. So now I'm going to look at my last 2 terms. So I'm going to look at that 10x and the 15, okay? So I need to find my GCF. 10 is going to be 5 times 2 with 1x. And then 15 is 5 times 3, and there are no variables. Okay, so they have a 5 in common, but they do not have an x in common. So there's 1 x there, but there's not an x there. So I'm done. So 5 is going to be my GCF. Okay, so now I need to rewrite 5 so that it's outside the parentheses like we had done in that part B. So again, your 5 is going to go on the outside. So GCF's on the outside, and then I need to do division to see what's on the inside. So 10 divided by 5 is a 2. And then it had 1 x with it, so I'm going to drop that x down with it. And then 15 divided by 5 is 3. Okay, so I am done. Okay, what do B and D have in common? So look at B, look at D. What do you notice? Well, I noticed that 2x plus 3 is in the parentheses twice. Okay, so that 2x plus 3 is written twice. Okay, so how can we rewrite our final answer? So let's go back. Remember, we found the GCF of these first 2 terms and then factored that out. And we found the GCF of the last 2 terms and factored it out. So we have this 3x squared and this 5 out here. And then we've got that parenthesis twice. So what you do is you rewrite the GCFs together in one parenthesis, and in the other parenthesis, you write what was in common. So we had 2x plus 3 in one parenthesis, and then the two GCFs were 3x squared and then a 5. Okay? And so that's how you would write your answer. So you are going to have two parentheses with two terms in both of them, and then whatever term was in the parenthesis would be written once, and then you take your two outside GCFs and write them together in a parenthesis like this, okay? And so then you're done, okay? So when you factor by grouping, you want two terms in parentheses like so. So let's take a look at another example. I'm going to do the first two with you, and then I'm going to let you try the last two on your own. So first thing you have to do is first group the terms, so the first two and the last two. So I kind of like split the problems up like this. So I have, you need to find the GCF. So 6 is 3 times 2, and then there were 3 x's. 8 is going to be 4 times 2, but then you have to break that down further like that, and then they had 2 x's, okay? So the GCF, they have a 2 in a common, and that's it. So 2 is my GCF. They have 2 x's in common, so x squared, okay? Now I'm going to see what is in the parentheses that's left, and I do that by dividing. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. And then x cubed, take away 2 x's, I'm left with 1x. Okay, then hop over to this term, 8 divided by 2 is 4. And then I had x squared and I took them all away, so there is none with that. Okay, so I'm done. Now I'm going to hop over to these last two terms. So if you want, you can rewrite it. Break down 15 into 5 times 3 with 1x. 20, 2 times 10, and then 10 is 5 times 2. So what do they have in common? They have a 5 in common. And they don't have any more numbers in common, and they don't have any variables in common, so that's the GCF. So now I hop in here and find my other two terms, and you do that by dividing. So 15 divided by 5 is 3, and then you drop down that x, and then 20 divided by 5 is 4. Okay, so one good thing that happened is I noticed that my parentheses are the same. Okay, if that does not happen, you messed up somewhere. These will always be the same. And the last thing you do is just rewrite the two problems. So you combine your two GCFs in one parenthesis, and then you rewrite the other parenthesis once. And then we're done. Okay? All right, I'm going to try 12 with you, and then you will be on your own. I'm going to move that over. Nope, I'm not. Okay. So 12, again, I'm going to look at my first two terms. 12 is going to be 6 times 2, and then 3 times 2 times 2, and then with 3 x's. And then 2 is just 2 times 1 with 2 x's. So GCF would be a 2. They have a 2 in common. And then they have 2 x's in common, so x squared. Okay? So the GCF of those first two terms is 2x squared. I'm going to erase this so we can have some more room. So once you've got your GCF, that's going to go on the outside. You just need to see what's left on the inside by dividing. So 12 divided by 2 is 6. And then x cubed, take away 2 x's would be 1x. And then you're going to hop over here and do 2 divided by 2 and get a 1. And then x squared and x squared would just be 1. Okay? So here's a shortcut because you know you want your parentheses to repeat. So if you want, you can go ahead and rewrite that second parenthesis and just find the number on the outside. Okay? So to find the number on the outside, you're going to have to look at these last two terms, and you're going to divide like usual. So you could do negative 18 divided by 6 to get a negative 3. Or you could do negative 3 divided by 1 to get negative 3. And so that checks out, and you can kind of distribute to double check. So negative 3 times 6 is negative 18, and then negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. Okay, so it checks out. So now I'm going to rewrite my terms in a parenthesis. So 2x squared minus 3 is in one parenthesis, and then that 6x plus 1 is in another parenthesis. Okay, so again, a shortcut to solving by or factoring by grouping is once you figure out the first term, you can rewrite this parenthesis again because it has to repeat, and just divide to find the GCF. Okay, so it's a little bit of a shortcut. So why don't you try the next two on your own? Press pause and we will go over them. Press pause. So here is the answer I got for 13 and 14. So notice the first thing I did was group the first two, and I found the GCF. I saw they had a 3 in common, and then they had two x's in common, so 3x squared. Hopefully by this time you've noticed that x squared will always be the GCF if it starts with a 3 and a 2. So 3x squared is on the outside, and then I needed to find these two terms in the middle by dividing. So 9 divided by 3 is a 3, and then x cubed, take away two of them, is just 1x. Notice that I will always have a linear term in here, so it's a number x plus a number. That is always going to happen. And then again, 6 divided by 3 is a 2, and then notice there's not going to be a variable with this term, as always. Okay. Rewrite this parenthesis over here to save you some time, and then divide. So 12 divided by 3 is 4, and then double check that again. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Okay, so the 4 is the GCF of these other two terms. And then the last step is to take this GCF and this GCF in one parenthesis and rewrite that other parenthesis together. Okay, so notice you will always have an x squared term, and you will always have an x term here, both with numbers. So again, over here, you're going to look at these first two terms and find the GCF. So GCF was a 2, and then again, the GCF will be x squared. You're going to divide, and 10 divided by 2 is 5, and then x3 take away x2 is just 1x, and then 12 divided by 2 is a 6, and then there were no x squareds with that. Again, rewrite this parenthesis over here, so 5x plus 6, and then divide. So 6 divided by 6 is a 1. Double check it again. 5 divided by 5 is a 1. The last thing is to rewrite these two GCFs in their own parenthesis. So 2x squared plus 1, and then rewrite that one parenthesis once. 5x plus 6. Okay? So again, notice, I have an x squared term, I have an x squared term. I have a number x plus a number. I have a number x plus a number. Okay? So these things are always going to tend to happen. Okay, so you can pick up on a pattern and it'll help you out. Okay, so now we get to practice. We are on AA7 now, factoring by grouping, and then you only have to get it to a 60%. If you go higher than a 60%, you will not know how to do those. So let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.